There we go. Hello.
Hola.
Hola.
How are you?
Fine. ¿Con quién hablo?
Con Alexander.
Hola, Alexander.
Dani.
Qué rico tenerte acá. Qué gusto.
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias. ¿Escucho a tu hijo por ahí o guagua o qué?
Sí,
Ay, qué
sí,
rico.
mi hijo por ahí. Después pongo en silencio el
Sí, súper,
micrófono.
súper. Un gusto tenerte por acá. Vamos a comenzar en un minuto.
Gracias.
Esperando un par de personas que se sumen. Súper. Okay, great. Okay. There's one more person that just joined from Chile. We'll see if we have more people in the waiting room there. Hi, Alex. How are you? Good to see you. That's him. Okay, good to see you. Great to have you. New look. This is the lockdown look, huh? Everybody's developing the coronavirus look.
Coronavirus look, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm fine, thank you. That is Pravir there. Okay. All right, we're going to start just to take care and manage the time. People will join in, and that's perfectly fine. Let me welcome you briefly to this. This is what it's meant to be, a very relaxed conversation, but what we think is relevant to talk a little bit about these issues, okay? We will be talking with Pravir Jha, and I'll allow him to introduce himself because he has a big story to share, but he will choose probably the most outstanding landmark in his life. But what I can say about him is that I've been following him for a long while on LinkedIn, and just by a matter of chance, accidentally, something that you would have never, ever expected, we ran into each other in one of the cities that I was touring and visiting in India. And he was shopping for something and I was shopping for something. We recognized each other because we travel on the same plane. And then we said, I cannot believe you're the man I've been reading all these wonderful quotes from. And that's how we started and, developing a friendship. And also there's this admiration about what we do, which is obviously help people develop on their leadership skills and human resources to develop their own strategy towards the company. So that's what I will say about Pravir. And then please, Pravir, take it away from your end.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Claudia. I'm delighted. And thank you for inviting me to join you on this webinar. First, it's very nice of you to think that this is an input we should share to the community of leaders and individuals. You started thinking about Chile and then say that what do we learn from a perspective, literally from the other side of the world. So delighted to be here. Thank you. And I think we are going through unprecedented turmoil. All of us in our different countries, regions, for different occasions have had disruptions. So we all understand disruptions, but the world getting disrupted all at the same time and at a speed and pace which is unimaginable and is dangerously unimaginable is a huge leadership problem for companies, for individuals. And I think this conversation, your morning and my evening, is good to just exchange perspectives as to what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, how are people responding, what could we learn from each other. And very much like you today, I'm not formally running a company. I'm now more in an advisory role, but I do hear the call for help or the need to think aloud with leaders of various companies of large scale, small scale, individuals who are struggling with, I would like to believe, some sense of paranoia, not just about the crisis today, what will happen post the crisis? When will the crisis end? Will we have our jobs? Will we have pay cuts? And I think there's a fair bit of a people problem which is there. So thank you very much for thinking about the issue and for inviting me. And I'm happy to share my perspectives in whichever way you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, let's just talk a little bit about logistics. We will be talking for fairly an hour. We will be taking all your questions. Please post them on the Zoom chat. If you want to interrupt, feel free to do so also and raise your hand and we will go back to you. Um, just unload any questions that you may have in your mind. Please just unload them. It's very important that we share, and we know that there are so many queries that we cannot answer today, that they need to be discussed, you know, and talked about. We cannot keep everything inside, given the circumstances that we are already inside our own homes and we cannot leave the house. So conversation must be there. The possibility to flow in the conversation must be there. Let's try to facilitate that, okay? Having said that, I would like to start a little bit with the following. When we were thinking and we came up with this idea with Pravir, we were really thinking about the conversation that we have. Remember, Pravir, was about is today's leadership the kind of leadership that we will need once, first of all, to go through this period, and second, once this is over. We don't know when it's going to be over, but there are so many signs about where we put our efforts, either on ourselves, because we're leading ourselves and our families. Second, if we have a leadership position in a company, like some of you may have, I know Alex does, and a lot other people do too, what to tell people, how to lead, what not to say, you know, and how to say it. These are very important issues. And we promised we would cover 3 concepts. One of them was resilience, the other was perseverance, and then grounding collaboration, because the whole spectrum of the way we used to do things has changed, you know. We have to deal with this Zoom every day, all the time. And just to stand out a couple of things that I've been noticing, many managers and people in leadership roles are working many more hours than they used to before. They cannot divide their day between rest and work, because everything is happening at home. And that the responsibility of not knowing what's going to happen is a huge uncertainty, and it generates a lot of anxiety. So that is a little bit of the context. So on that point, to start with, maybe we will come to the final conclusion of what kind of leadership, but what can you share? Because you've been thinking and sharing lots of thoughts about leadership throughout your professional life, Prabir. But how do you see leadership if we compare India, 1.3 billion people, Chile, 18 million people, long geography, you're a huge continent. You guys are in lockdown. We have a couple of cities and municipalities in lockdown. And we're dealing with lots of self-leadership issues, you know, how to lead myself through this. So what is your take on this?
No, this is brilliant, I think. So let me just share some quick perspectives, and I'll keep it fleeting so
Sure.
that people on the chat can pick up anything and we can respond to questions later. So you said it right. You know, the context of leadership today is very different. And I don't even want to get to corporate leadership. And you started very well saying leadership starts first from yourself, leadership of the self. How do you lead your own thinking, your own heart, your own mind when you are almost confined to your home, right? You do not have the luxury of going to office, having a break from home, or when you come home, it's a break from work. Everything is happening at the same time, and it's not that it's 3 days or 2 days. India is technically today in a 21-day lockdown. Most likely it's going to get extended, right? And therefore it starts by asking yourself, can you hold your nerves?
Mm.
Fundamental of leadership is, can you hold your nerves? And I think that itself is a problem, because imagine you're in a closed space with family. How do you handle differences of opinion there? You can't even say, hey, I'm going to take a smoke break, or I'm going to adjourn and let's meet over a meeting tomorrow, right? You're right there. And this is really a test of self-leadership first. How do you do it with yourself? And then how do you do with your family? And at the end of the day, it's not going to be by just instruction. It is going to be by role modeling. So the dimension of role modeling becomes so critical even in your own homes, right? So what do you do? How do you chip in? How do you help, not help? So even before you expect your family to respond to a dimension of leadership, you've got to role model. So role modeling becomes very, very central. Now, if I were to take it from beyond home to the workplace, different leaders, managers, different kinds of functions, size of business and industries are all struggling with different challenges. And how do you therefore stay connected with your team? You don't see them every day. Thankfully, the internet works. Thankfully, at least in India, we have invested a lot in digital technology over the last some years. Today, it's helping us. And you can't necessarily manufacture tire trucks and automotive parts today because that's not critical. But food, essential products, medicines, that's going on as usual. Government has restricted access. So how do you therefore energize your organization? How do you communicate to your organization? And I think it also calls, therefore, for a very different level of empathy. You know, being able to understand what's topmost in the minds of people. What simple questions do they have? And remember that these are people who are also sitting in their homes. So when you're speaking to them in some way, the message is going right to their families. And therefore, even while you have to be honest, the tone has to be high on empathy. Very, very important to do that. And not every leader is able to manage this as well. How real time do you communicate to your people? How do you make sure that, you know, while the top management does some things, every level of manager connects with his or her people? And again, you know this as well as I do, that not every leader is a natural leader. Many of them are position holders, title holders. Situations like this don't just uh, help titles walk through. This is the time when they look at your face, when they look at your frowns, they look at your smile, or they look at the lack of it, your own tension. So I think a lot of those non-verbal cues of leadership are being put under a microscope. And therefore, the ability to be honest and yet be supportive will be a very important dimension of leadership in today's context.
Mm-hmm. So how can we be supportive? And you mentioned something that I really like, the balance between honesty and empathy. But how can we be supportive when we cannot support ourselves? We may be going through the same anxiety as everybody else goes, maybe at different levels, degrees, etc. So how do we, where do we get that resilience to actually go through this, you know, just to get into the first topic?
Yeah. So we'll get into resilience, but you know, to me, my thought process is anchored on two hashtags that I have been writing about of late. One is vulnerability-based leadership. Historically, leaders have felt that, you know, it was a very macho way of looking at leadership. I have all the answers. I'm always on top of things. I don't need to show my emotions. I don't need to be vulnerable. I think situations like this, and as we get back to work in whatever weeks and months from now, the new norm of leadership will be about vulnerability. And today, the situation allows us that opportunity, Claudia. You know, no one expects us to have all the answers. In our own companies, organizations, there's a larger governmental situation, national situation, international situation, so they don't expect us. But leaders have to be honest to say, you know what, this much I know, this much I don't know. This is what I sense of the place. And I think that itself gives a lot of credibility to leadership, rather than kind of assume that you know everything when you're actually talking things which you have no control about. So I think vulnerability-based leadership is, and I'll link that with resilience in a while, is very, very important. Recognize what you know, recognize what you don't know, ask people who might be able to ideate with possibilities, give you inputs, co-opt people in your thought process. And when you make people feel included, life becomes a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
The other concept that I want to kind of talk about and will build into resilience is what I have been calling hashtag optimism quotient. See, at the end of the day, there must be a sense of reality. There is no doubt about it. You know, We cannot assume, no, 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 it's fine, we'll all be okay in another 5 days. No one knows, right? So we must acknowledge that sense of reality. We must understand and accept that this is the crisis that we are in today and might continue over the next couple of quarters. But having said that, how do you get people to believe in that ray of hope, which is what I call optimism quotient? How do you make people feel that we will come out of it? Well, these are some ways in which we are thinking of responding to the situation. This is how we might see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think you have to try and manage both. No one expects you to have all the answers. I don't, and whoever I'm coaching through this, I'm saying no one expects you to have the entire roadmap of the next 6 months in front of you. But at least can you say, these are the things that we are thinking of doing, which will mitigate the crisis, which will mitigate the pain. And at the end of the day, even if it means tough people decisions, which is what people really are bothered about at some stage, that what's going to happen to me? Is my job safe? Is my salary safe? And so on and so forth. I think it is important to say that we will try and get maximum benefit for maximum people, but with minimum pain. I think this authenticity, this honesty is important, because there is no point saying no one is going to lose a job, no one is going to get a dip in salaries, and 3 months later you go and do that. It's going to kill your credibility as a leader. Yeah. So I think these are the two fundamental building blocks on which I will want to talk, if it's okay, a little on resilience, throw some ideas.
Yes, please.
I think resilience is fundamentally a life skill. And not many leaders, not many managers, not many individuals may necessarily have gone through experiences in life, not only at work, which has taught them resilience. And you realize you have resilience or otherwise only post an event. Unfortunately, you cannot say in an interview, oh, I'm very resilient. There's no data to support that. And therefore, this life skill either will get created or we will miss the opportunity through this crisis that we are going through. And to me, a couple of things that people and leaders can think about. One is, and I talked about this, a sense of reality. It is very important for leaders to understand, accept, and communicate what is that sense of reality. Because at the end of the day, how do you prepare to endure and survive the extraordinary hardship that a lockdown or a quarantine environment or business situations will undergo? Some industries will go through deeper upheaval. Their recovery will be longer than maybe some, but everyone is going to be touched. So this sense of reality is very important, and it's connected with the optimism quotient. The second thing that I think is very important for leaders to encourage for themselves and for their teams is the ability to improvise. You will not have infinite resources. We are living through an environment of constraints. So instead of playing the victim syndrome, oh, I don't have this, if I had 10 more people, if I had $5 million more, I would have done. You don't have that. And therefore, the need to start, which, and you've known India well, so in some ways, what we in India we call jugaad. Jugaad is the ability to make meaning out of things that otherwise you would never have imagined could be put to use. Your constraints, how do you improvise your constraints? How can you be creative with the limitations that you have? There may be unimaginable ways in which you can use your limited resources. And I think most of us as leaders in corporations, we are used to having adequate resources around us all the time. That world is not going to come back in the near term. So how do we individually and how do we collectively learn to look and hone the ability to improvise? I think that's a very, very important tactical tool and technique to acquire and learn.
Yeah.
Another dimension, and maybe along with this entire staunchness of facing reality with the need to improvise, I think it is for ourselves and for our teams to understand or search for meaning. It's a little philosophical, but how do we search for meaning? How do we go beyond the transaction that is happening, the hardships that we face, to construct possibilities for the future. And that not only helps us through the process, it actually helps build individually and collectively a capacity which will come very handy when the resurgence happens, when the recovery happens. And to help the search for meaning, it is very important to go beyond your immediate day-to-day sufferings, look at some concrete goals, which might even be a little forward-looking, anchored in some values, in some sense of purpose, in some true north. So it moves this bias for negativism to move to a larger purpose of searching for meaning. And I think if you put all of this together, the concrete, facing reality, searching for meaning, improvising, three little things, if we are able to string together and make it a way of life at home, individually, and then to our teams, I think we would have got off to a fairly good start on trying to build resilience in our organizations, rather than talk a governmental language that finally all will be good. I don't know whether it helps, but I'll stop there.
No, I think it's very interesting. And to your point, let me just remind everybody who's in, I've been making some notes to share on the chat, just to outstand some concepts. And also, please feel free to write your questions or interrupt. If there's a question right now or a comment you would like to share, please feel free to unmute yourself and just raise your question. For the time being, I wanted to add something to what you were saying. To me, the whole perspective of what we're dealing with is challenging our cultural background. In other words, we have a life that is based on so many outstanding moments that in hindsight you say, did I learn something? Didn't I learn anything? And that is the challenge today, where we can we can pinpoint the moments where we can get our resources from. So when you say philosophically search for meaning, that's looking forward and present as well. But if we go back to actually understand why we may or may not be resilient, is looking into our own adversity and challenges, and the way we deal with frustration and misfortune. And if we compare both countries, and you can tell me more about yours, but obviously in Chile, there's a beautiful video going around about so many moments that we have come up triumphant, not without any pain, because we felt pain,
Correct.
but we came out triumphant as a whole, as a people, there's, the incidents with the miners in the south, in the north. Then we had a huge earthquake, 9.3 almost. It's just amazing, or 8.3 if I'm not remember wrong. And then so many other moments in our lives. So we've learned how to bounce back. And that is not only in our culture, but it's part of what we did at different times in different ways. So that resource belongs to us. So culturally speaking, and leadership, we are the representation of our own background when we lead. So yeah, there are these guidelines that are general and standards for all people all over the world. Nonetheless, you have your own tone, your own hue, and I like that. And obviously, we are a community and a people that makes fun of a lot of things. We are a community that will be laughing at a disaster and making a joke and things like that very quickly to get our spirits high. We're extremely aware of the notion of solidarity when it's huge and massively, like just recently, we raised unbelievable amounts of money for a cause that is dear to our hearts in our country. So, and this is happening today. All that thing happened online, and it's a representation of us. So when I say we do have the capacity, I think about the future. So it says, yes, we do have the capacity to bounce back. That is part of us. So let's not fear because it's in ours. The only fear or respect, I would say, it's not even fear, but respect we should have is about the virus. We don't know the shape, we don't know where it's at, so we have to repress ourselves from behaving the same way we used to. So that's my take on cultural, cultural
Look,
leadership in that
I
sense,
think it's very well said, Claudia, and I'll piggyback on one of the points that you made. And we've done 2 rounds of that in a country as massive as India with 1.3 billion people, as you said. One was some weekends back. This is about how do you build a sense of engagement? How do you build a sense of solidarity? That's the word you use. How do you build a sense of self-belief? And some of this is tokenism, and it's kind of somewhere flows into your question on leadership. So the whole country for 5 minutes on one Sunday, a few Sundays back, the Prime Minister of India said that, you come out and you must make some noise, you can whistle, you can, use bells, you can, if nothing else, you can use a spoon and a steel plate. But just to thank all the people, the doctors and the paramedics, who are helping on this. So one is about appreciation, gratitude. The other is about leveraging collective solidarity to celebrate. Because, through this crisis, resilience also comes from the belief that we can do it, which is back to my optimism quotient thing. How do you celebrate that? And then this 2 days back, I think we, on the 9th, for 9 minutes, India shut off in all the homes, all the lights.
and you
And
turn up the candles.
people use candles or whatever. So at the end of the day, little rituals are about solidarity, expression of solidarity, hope, faith, and belief. So when you talk about that, it is about reminding people we can do it, because the journey is a tough one.
It is.
And you cannot climb Mount Everest unless you celebrate every little step of the way, because there are going to be temporary setbacks. There are going to be, that's the nature of the disease, right?
Yeah.
But through all that process, so I think, I was just wanted to share with you on your point of solidarity. And since you also talked about laughing and whatever, I mean, I tend to agree. The ability and willingness to laugh at ourselves is
Exactly.
a huge input to building resilience. Otherwise, which also helps us with our vulnerability.
Yeah.
When you can laugh at yourself, you don't take yourself more seriously than you need to. You have to be responsible, but not be more serious than we need to. So
Yeah.
I agree with what you said.
For a while, I've been developing this and been mentioning a lot some of the characteristics of a leader that takes them on a journey. Leadership is a journey. It's because we are there on a road that it is unknown to us, and challenges will appear from every corner, and we have to learn as we go. We do have tools. Some of them are known to us, some of them are unknown, but suddenly they just appear as a I would say as a surprise, as a resource that we didn't really know it was there. So going into our next topic, which is perseverance, and that is pretty amazing, because it's based and founded on determination, on the ability that we may have on resolving and being resolute towards what is going on. And today, some of the challenges we're facing are so out of our control that fear engaging us is probably on much more darker or much more impulsive things. So it may be the time to take a step backward and just look at the facts on who to trust regarding the medical aspect or the sanitary aspect, and then your decisions about the business today and your decisions about your family today. So tenacity must be there, which is another way of looking at perseverance. And how do you see this? Because I have my own take, given the fact that what I've been thinking about is about this journey that we're in, but I would like you to share with us.
So, if we just take the COVID context, uh, inherent in the solutioning, which is social distancing, is perseverance. Now, if you look at it from an Indian cultural context, and again, since you know India, lots of people, everyone is on the street together. There's a lot more of community-based living and celebrating. It's a huge cultural shift to make, and we have to persevere. And at this point in time, one is education about why it is important to kind of sustain that path, education about why lockdowns are needed, education about acknowledging that there will be constraints. Now, I'm talking from a government or society perspective. Same thing applies to organizations, right? At the end of the day, when you are, actually up against odds and you want people to persevere, you've got to continue to keep showing them the mirror, keep egging them on, and celebrating that. So there is an issue around COVID for perseverance. And in India, for example, the lockdown is going to be extended in all probability, right? It is not easy. I've not stepped out of my house for the last 25 days or so. And you get used to it. If you ask me, you get used to it. You persevere.
True.
You start making peace. When you start making peace with your circumstances, you respect your situation better.
Yes.
Perseverance actually doesn't work when you assume that life is as was, and why should I not continue doing the way I was doing. And I think this mismatch creates the biggest problem and dissonance. So perseverance is about an intellectual appreciation. Second, is it about an emotional acceptance of your constraints? And third is really about both the fear of, if I don't do this, something is going to happen, and the hope that if we were to kind of live with this in just a few more days, a few more weeks, we will possibly have the worst behind us. And the choice today, if you ask me, Claudia, is, would you want economics to prevail over life, which is livelihood to prevail over survival, or the other way around? And I know I've heard two different points of view. One is, if you are well placed, yes, you can tide over this period and you can save your life, and it doesn't hurt you a month, 2 months of staying at home. But at least in India, where we have a huge mass of unorganized workforce and labor, right, who may not have statutory or guaranteed wages, so to speak, what is the appeal from the government, and how are corporates responding, or how are we as individuals responding? We are saying, and I think we have been overwhelmed with the response, very much like what you shared. The corporates have been volunteering with huge contributions to the government to fight this, because everything costs money, right, on the scale and size that we are. And there was an appeal made by the government, and I know that many of us have responded. So we have in India still a lot of domestic support available, drivers and maids and stuff like that. And we have allowed them not to come to work because it's a lockdown, but on full wages. So even if you are not getting your normal salaries, how are you sharing that burden, so that someone who, without your help, will possibly not even survive, will therefore come out onto the streets, will therefore exaggerate the illness? So when you put all of these bits together, you build the collective resolve of perseverance. So perseverance to me is both an input, but to me it is more an outcome of many things which gets you to want to persevere.
One of the things that challenges me, and I hear this from some of my clients as well, is the fact that how can you persevere, is a question they pose, is like, how can you persevere in such an uncertain world, right? And my take on this is start small and grow big, at this point in life and this moment in the history of the world, we cannot challenge ourselves to the wildest of our dreams. We have to go little by little and take
Yeah.
tiny steps and tiny habits into acquisition and make them your own. And start from, I mean, your surroundings is your home, and persevere on that. So the tenacity to hold that little practice is very important. For example,
Well
a
said.
lot of business people today are challenged with keeping the division between home and work, but at the same time taking care of their sanity. And sanity, I mean psychological well-being, enthusiasm, so you keep a good balance. For that, you need to take a tiny habit into action, you know, and
Well said.
adhere to that and stress it. And that is one piece of advice that is important to start, you know, making use of as soon as possible. Because this is an upheaval. It's like going to go, we don't know where really, but if you take, you know, the situation of other unfortunate countries like Italy and Spain and
The US
so
now.
on, and the US, is just amazing, you
Yeah.
know. So one little step, and persevere towards that. Check yourself every day and every week, and let's move forward to adding another one, so your sense of control is at peace. Because right
Yeah.
now what is challenging is the huge amount of things that we cannot control, and we've never been challenged like this before. So let's take that
Well
step,
said.
you
But
know.
could I add one more perspective, Claudia?
Absolutely.
I, I mean, as I'm listening to you, I also think that one of the big uh, levers of helping build this desire and the effort to persevere is from what I would call catharsis, both as individuals and as a collective community, company, business, whatever else. How much of catharsis are we enabling or doing in through the times that we live? Because catharsis is a very strong release of negativism,
Yes.
right? Otherwise, if you do not, even the effort to take those baby steps and make that into a habit will not come. So I think to let off steam, to let off the negativism that grows either by confinement or by just seeing that the world I knew as of yesterday is possibly not there, you know. So I believe that catharsis as part of psychological health, and in turn leading on to the ability, the intent, and then the ability to persevere will be a very important dimension for both leaders and individuals to keep in mind.
Probably that's very relevant, and I've experienced it with many of my clients, and I do believe that some of the people who are here also have experienced it. Our challenge is not to get stuck in catharsis, you know, and to move forward. I mean, there
Yes,
should be room for
yes,
that, but then let's move on to the next step.
I agree with you.
If
I
not,
agree with
your energy is drained, and right now we need our spirits really high, because physically you know much more than this than we do in the West, but it's our emotions that would allow the virus to develop. If we are, you know, if our immune system is built up, and we have emotions that will generate sort of like a little barrier, that will also help us. So catharsis, I agree with you. And also, like you said before, from a leader that shows his own vulnerability, but at the same time, let's not get stuck in there, right?
Now, that's why I started by saying that, you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, it depends on your staunchness of
Mhm.
seeing yourself in the mirror. The
Yeah,
sense of reality you cannot deny, because then you're not being honest also. But
yeah,
having said that, it is important to recognize that emotions,
yeah,
you know, need to be ventilated, because, you know, once you've let off steam, then it's again action stations and you move forward. But if
yeah.
you suppress the emotions, then the heart often rules the mind. Then you'll not
Right,
be able to even want to move forward. So that's a
right.
limited point.
Right, right. So our one of the, as we build up the conversation, please guys, and some people are joining in, no worries. We are here to share your concerns, your questions, your thoughts. Please feel free to interrupt. anytime you feel like it, or join your questions in the chat group. It's a little box below if you're not used to using this, but it's right there. But I would like to move on to the following, which is we agree that grounding collaboration today in a virtual environment that is, even though we feel together, may be very, very easy to get stuck in the system of silos, very much, many companies that I have accompanied have really challenged themselves to move away from that, but physically, because the contact is there, because they run into each other, the company, we as Latin Americans, we South Americans and Chileans, we kiss on the cheek every day, every time. Some companies, and there's a person here from that company, they kiss everyone as they enter a meeting, as they leave a meeting. I mean, there's a lot of contact, so social distancing is not part of our environment, and that is a great ground for collaboration. So, as having said that, I think today's challenge is understanding that collaboration can be virtual, and can be joyful and fruitful, and not just because you are getting the job done. And I want to point this little thing, and then please feel free to interrupt. But today, this scenario is allowing us to get to know some details of the other persons that we're not exposed to. Some details, some videos have been going around and so on, many things that you may not want to know. But for example, as you can see in my background, I have my books, but at the top of there's a hat. So people may look at my hat and say, so what is that hat about? So it opens up conversations that you would, because I'm letting you into my home, and I'm allowing, and I'm sharing some personal areas that make me much more comfortable. I'm sitting on my desk, I'm looking out the window. And that is also a wonderful, access to collaboration, because collaboration at the end of the day is about connecting us. It grows from the connection that we develop as human beings. And that is my take on what we can do. Obviously, there are at least 3 or 4 stages to go through. But what is your take on how can we ground this moment in history to grow on collaboration rather than just stay in silos?
Oh, I agree with you, Claudia. And I wrote a piece on it in the Times of India, which is one of India's largest and most widely read paper by millions. And the theme of that was really that social distance does not necessarily need to mean emotional disconnect. And some of the examples that you just mentioned are exactly the things that you can do. Many a time, and it varies culture to culture and people to people, in some environments, societies, communities, even if you are, air kissing or shaking hands or doing whatever, you may not still know enough of that person, right? So you go with symbolism, but you don't know what's happening. Many institutions say, why should I be bothered about the emotional baggage of the person at home when he or she comes to a workplace? I've had a CEO with whom I was trying to have a conversation, and he asked me that question, but people don't behave as rationally as we like to think that they do. There's a lot of emotion. So this work from home, seeing people virtually, I get to see a bit of your library, you possibly see a little bit of my library. We are not in a suit, or we are not dressed as, formal. So I think, it is better than not having this at all. Imagine a situation where we were not even wired together, and you had 3 weeks or 5 weeks of a lockdown. It is very difficult to sustain that. So I think, it is cathartic. Second, it is a bridge. Third, I also very strongly believe that in times like these, it is very useful to create virtual clubs. So common interests. For example, I know you as a role holder in my company. But imagine if we were to, and I know you like dogs and I like dogs, right? So, but we never talked dogs because we never connected on dogs. We talked work, So now when I hear a bark or you see a dog, maybe, oh, I never knew you had a dog. Now imagine from the CEO to the secretary, that could be, and globally, you could form almost a dog lovers club. Now,
Right.
I'm just giving stupid ideas, or maybe it's trekking, or it's movies, or whatever else. Or, oh, you also play guitar and I play guitar. So this opportunity of getting to know people beyond their titles and roles, and use virtual clubs as a way of breaking silos, because that's the word you use, of building connects between people. And finally, what are silos? Silos are basically behavior of two people, and therefore they're groups of people. And I personally think if we can use this time to create some of these virtual interest groups, get to understand each other, get to understand their circumstances, get to understand and get to be empathetic with their circumstances. When we get back to our workplace, I think there is a greater opportunity for us. No guarantees yet, because you and I know this. We take people for offsites, they have a great time, but when they come back, they
Exactly.
go back to their. But this is not an offsite. Everyone knows it. It's about life. So my own hope and my own bias for optimism is we will get to know more of our colleagues better than otherwise. If leaders are smart, they could use bit of this virtual time to talk non-shop. Let's get to know
Exactly.
each other a lot better. And if they can use this time smartly, when people get back to their workplace, this becomes a great baseline for us to, because today, even if you don't like the other person, it's a time when life is put in perspective. Life is short, life is fragile. Is it
Exactly.
worth living with our egos and our, and I personally have always felt in my career and experience that most differences are not substantive differences. They are largely style differences. Just because our communication styles don't vibe, or something doesn't vibe, I don't like her nose and he doesn't like my, every irrational thing can trigger something. So I think this is a time when, away from a formal work environment, there's an opportunity for us to unfreeze and thaw, and let's use the time well.
Yeah. So this if we are building all that for our own sake and security, first health, second livelihood, how do we cooperate for unity? Because we closed our proposal for this conversation on the note of generating team unity, right? But team unity is so much more than the old-fashioned word team work. Now we're talking about world unity. It's about live, it's about uh, it's so relevant today. So what would you say? Because at least, and I would share after you talk, but please let us.
So, for me, I'll keep it very simple and straight. How do we, at different levels of our existence, as individuals, as companies, as nations, as a global community, what is really our shared purpose?
Mm,
Ultimately, it is that search. I talked about search for meaning. It's basically search for purpose. What's our true search for purpose? And to look more at things which are in common than things which are different. So a lot of our time goes in looking at our differences and managing those differences, rather than looking at, there are so many things in common. And if you look at what is in management called the fold field, force field analysis, it basically says the same thing: multiply your positives. So my take is that a unity of purpose is far more important, because we are tied at least on three things together. And a lot of things which are so-called differences, to me, is fine. At the end of the day, we are not sterile entities. We don't have to be identical. It is good for us to have some diversity in our gene pool, in our thinking. But as long as we can converge on what is the common intent and purpose. And I
mhm.
think as leaders, the takeaway to business houses, institutions, corporates would be, try and use this crisis at wherever you sit to reinforce the unity of purpose, because that is your job, that is your influence, that is your inspiration,
Mm.
right? And just to remind people, because sometimes it's so intuitive that we don't even recognize it.
True.
So the crisis should be one which communicates that unity of purpose, and for the moment, tolerate, sustain, and live with differences, because differences will always exist. But if you only solve or work on differences, given the crisis we are in at this point in time, humanity, nations, businesses, I mean, they will struggle a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. One of the challenges when you think of a team, or when I think of a team, one of the challenges is what happens when there's a level of team unity and one of the team members leaves or is fired, or for any reason decides to leave the team and the company. Well, today it's not only about that, which could be obviously some of the challenges that we will face when this is over, or through this pandemic, but the fact that some of my colleagues may lose their lives. A family member from one of my colleagues may lose their lives. Maybe one of my leaders may lose their lives. And I don't want to be dark about it. It's a fact. It could happen. It could happen to my family. It could happen to my neighborhood. And then we have to think about global unity. We have to really think about humanity. And that to me is striking, thinking about, what happens in Italy and what happens in Spain and today the United States. It breaks my heart. Today, the information in Chile is that we have unfortunately lost 48 Chilean people. 48 Chilean people. I mean, 48 human beings. I feel sad, and I feel for them. And I feel sad for those families and for those, I don't know how many people they've touched in their lives. So empathy should be there. So we think of all as a team.
No, empathy is very well said. I think empathy is important, and we've talked this word right through our conversation. But I'll just share an instance. India is the largest producer of what now a lot of the medical community says is a very powerful medicine to treat COVID. It's hydroxychloroquine, right? It's basically used for malaria. And India is the largest producer of that medicine because we have malaria as still a major disease here. Now, this product was banned from being exported because we ourselves have a huge need in India. But I know the US president reached out to the government, the Brazilian president has reached out, because everyone now needs that supply. And the government of India says, okay, we are going to allow exports, we'll try and ramp up. Now, at the end of the day, you don't need to. But this is the unity of purpose, just the point that you're mentioning. Yes, you will have issues. Maybe the odd guy in India will run out of that medicine. That's the risk. But you will possibly be able to also ameliorate suffering across. And I think in different ways, each country, each company, each individual, if you can commiserate, empathize, connect, and do your little bit. At the end of the day, let's be honest, Claudia, each person will go through this with what is his or her luck and fortune, right? Yes. Because many a time you don't know, we are unconscious carriers of this virus. You meet someone or you are with someone, so despite all precaution, right? But can we at least understand, empathize? One of the big social problems which I suspect will happen, and God forbid it should happen, it should not become like HIV. Right. Or because a guy has corona, my God, I don't want that guy to live in my apartment. I don't want him to be in my neighborhood. So I think we need to use this entire journey of wanting to get to a unity of purpose with a lot more of understanding, empathy, and a little bit of giving yourself up, giving your own needs, including your space and independence, because it is good for the larger good.
Yeah. Well, very well said. In these last few minutes of this conversation, guys, thank you again for coming. I would like to open the mics for comments. If you don't feel comfortable with English, please feel free to make a comment in Spanish. I'll translate. And but tell us, what are you thinking? What are your comments? I made some notes on the chat, so you feel free to go back to some of those ideas. But we would like to hear from you and to see, you know, how do you, how are you facing this? How are you feelings on resilience, perseverance, grounding, collaboration, and what we have talked about today? Yeah. So I don't know. I see Carolina there. I know Alex is there. I see gentleman Sunita is there. Dipan is there. So please feel free to
Lady.
comment. Yes. If you're muted, just unmute yourself and feel free to comment or write a question. Yeah. Hi. Somebody? Hello, Sunita?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. So the question I have is, how do you deal with the level of ambiguity we have never seen or will never encountered? So is there a way which you can handle it better?
Good, very interesting question. Let me say this. There's this analysis about the kind of world we're living right now, and one of the characteristics is being extremely ambiguous.
Yeah.
Challenge ambiguity and also challenge uncertainty at this point because of the magnitude of this. You know, we're talking about worldwide pandemia where you cannot see the virus, but you need to keep away from it. So there's very little things you have at your control. Very little, if not anything. But the things that you have to ground them, because there are things that you can look and you can sort of back yourself and support yourself with those small things that you can control today. You can control how to take care of your health. You can control how to develop and build up your immune system, if we're talking about that. The kind of food you eat, the kind of thoughts you have, how much exposure you have to negative thoughts coming from the external world. In other words, how much television and news you see. And you can build from that point of view grounds for less ambiguity. You know, answers are not out there right now because we don't even know how this is going to flow. The answers are coming from the kind of life you want to have and the way you want to face it. So really, it's like answering these questions. It's like, is this the life I want to live? If I chose to live with my family today, what do I want to build up more of? And this wonderful space and room for developing those close connections today, you know? I don't know, Pravir.
No, I agree. I just want to add one or two perspectives. One is, you know, over the years, we've become far more individualistic in our thinking and doing. You know, and when you get confronted by something which is more community anchored, more widespread, you just feel you're not on top of things, you're not in control. And that is part of the nature of the beast that ambiguity is. You're never on top of the situation. And linked to that is therefore my additional suggestion. Don't try and force an answer. Don't force a black and white world when we live in a world of gray. This, if you're able to train your mind to get comfortable with, you will suddenly realize that it's not as bad. But because you've got trained, it's good, it's bad. It is morning, it is evening. It's our conditioning. And whenever you change conditioning, initially it looks tough, but ultimately it's just the way our mind perceives things. And it will have to be done because the world, not only of today, the world of tomorrow will continue to have black swans, will continue to have shocks, will continue to have gray. And people who are more comfortable with ambiguity and gray are the ones who are likely to not only survive, but to the point that we started with, actually build greater resilience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Carolina, yeah, you had a question, or Alex?
Yes. Yeah, I just want to say goodbye. I have to leave for another meeting, but I just want to say thank you very much for the invite, and it was very interesting. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Pravir.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to hear you.
Perfect. Thank you for coming.
Stay well.
Thank you. Thank you. Carolina.
Well,
Yes.
I agree with Alex. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in this space where we can talk more about the emotions. But thank you, Claudia, for the gift you give me right now with the things we can control. Because in every conversation I have, I said that we don't have control of anything, so we don't have to control. But yes, you are right. We have control of some things, what I'm going to eat, in what conversations I choose to be, if I'm going to see the news, what it's going to be my feed. But my question is, um, that my talent, or maybe the talent that our humanity is going to pass, or we are going on, is that it's so many poor coherence in the human being, with me include. Yesterday night, I say I'm not going to see news, nothing. But yesterday night, I began to see the news, and it was the situation in Ecuador. I don't know if you know the situation in Ecuador, and I get like, oh, shocked, because it was the mystery again of the uh, well, all of us we are going to die someday. But looking at Ecuador, why this can be Chile, where I am, and that the emotions are like,
Yes. Like crazy. They take you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And let me briefly share this with everybody who's not, I don't know if you're familiar with the situation in Ecuador, but unfortunately, and we have to be very careful about what we evaluate from that, because they were not prepared, institutionally, they were not prepared for such a huge pandemic. Therefore, the people who have died cannot be traced, so we don't really know if it's 100 plus, which is the number they are saying today, but people are saying that there are at least 300 people waiting to be picked up, corpses being picked up from their homes, from family homes. People, because of this, are not saying that they have coronavirus because they don't want to be picked up, and there are not enough coffins, so they bought a cardboard, cardboard boxes as coffins. Having said that, which is, I mean, when I saw it and they shared it live a couple of days ago, and they're very close to us, very close to our, for some emotional reason, we're very close to Ecuador. But there's their responsibilities there that has to do with probably government decisions and how to face it. They were not prepared. And it's totally natural, Carolina, and I agree with you, to think, could that be happening to us? And we don't know. And that is the tremendous thing. Because we don't know, we cannot predict, we cannot even fathom the idea that something similar could happen in our streets. And we're frail, we're vulnerable, we feel like, will the government have a response in time, and so on. So how do I face it? Because we cannot control the government, we cannot control the disease. All we can do is go back to us. So I think it's sanity, and it's very good a choice just to check on some things and not keep on wondering more and dwelling on the sadness. And by that, I don't mean not to be respectful of their laws in Ecuador, but obviously the sense of security that we're looking for comes from our own peace with something that you mentioned that is tremendous conversation, not for now, which is, how do we face death? How do we deal with the finite finite sense of who we are. We don't know when we're going to be. We don't know when we're going to go. It may be COVID, it may be not. But whatever the reason, when we are at peace with that, our probably behavior is much more coherent, you know. Prabir, I don't know what you can say.
No, I could sense the pain in Carolina's comment and question, and agree with you. And I think I liked also what I alluded to. You know, there's so much of negative news all around that it starts, bogging us down. Some of us maybe take it in our stride better. Some of us don't. My counsel is that let's tone down almost watching it like a game, right? Every minute, every hour, every 2 hours, because it just becomes so draining, right? So reduce, like a lot of WhatsApp messages now I don't read on the virus, because so many WhatsApp groups, because it's so depressing. And we talked about perseverance, we talked about resilience. So Carolina, my heart is with you, but I think just do what you try to do. Don't do too much of news tracking by the minute, by the hour. You'll feel a lot better. Get busy with something more constructive. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah. Okay. Dipan had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Prabir. I could relate to much of what you were saying, Prabir. I've seen you, demonstrate a lot of these in action. So for the benefit of Claudia and others, I've worked with Prabir. Currently, I'm a practicing coach. My question is the following: that and it is both to Prabir, you from an India and international point of view, and to Claudia. What is one of the ill effects of this situation, the COVID situation, is there is a significant impact on the economies of countries, and a lot of businesses are getting adversely affected because of this. Now, as and when, and hopefully very quickly, the situation comes around, there is going to be a pressure on, getting the business, getting the sales numbers, getting profitability, revenues up. And on the other end, there is going to be, an increased level of empathy and concern for the people, because psychologically, emotionally, they will need to come back into a new normal. In this kind of a situation, a leader's role is going to be very critical, because how do you balance between, the need to come back to generating revenues fast and, handling people's emotions and situations. And so what would you advise, how should a leader, and how would we as coaches, deal with this kind of situation?
Good. Prabir,
Thank you.
go ahead. Thank
Okay,
you,
so
Dipan.
I'll make a broader swipe comment, and Claudia, you can help more than with the specific of the coaching side. So, it's a great question, Deepan, and I think I will repeat what I tell a lot of leaders who believe that leadership is one particular kind of thing to be done. But leadership is actually both. They have to have the ability of being able to do this and also this on the one hand and on the other hand. So this yin and yang both will have to be handled by a leader. And that's why leadership is not an easy job. Otherwise, you can always do just one aspect and ignore the other. So you will have to understand emotions, you'll have to understand people's sensitivities, you'll have to understand societal implications. At the same time, you have to sustain your businesses and companies. And you will have to do what is the most creative thing. And I don't know at what stage you joined the webinar, but one of the things Claudia and I were talking about was also this ambiguity. Ultimately, leadership and the best leaders, and I personally believe this situation is going to create a new breed of leaders. They will create new heroes and new role models of leadership, right? And there will be people who will be able to manage both, because I will be in agreement with you that in the near term, let us say for the coming fiscal, the world is going to be in a tough situation. There will be job losses, let's be honest. And we are not just looking at big companies with deep pockets. There are many small companies, I'm sure in Chile, I'm sure in India. And there will be many who will go bottom up, or belly up. So all of that is going to happen. The question is, how do you deal with this situation with maximum sensitivity, empathy, and to the extent possible, economic succor. Now, some societies, some countries actually have a lot more social security norms in place. It will be easier there. In some countries where you don't have that, it will be tough. But I think through all of this, if we can preserve human dignity while sustaining business, I think it's a good aspiration. But it does not sound a very popular thing to say. But I'll also be honest: if businesses don't sustain, the whole ship capsizes. So between a few people getting offloaded, or the whole community taking some salary cut, etc., there will be pain. I mean, I advise a few companies, and I still got ideas today that, but we should still get a 10% revision on our compensation. I'm saying, in which world are you guys? And this is some of the leaders of that company, right? So it's bizarre sometimes. It's the same human species, but it is, therefore I use the word maximum impact with minimum pain. That is how great leaders would be looking at the combination, rather than looking again, which is back to this issue of gray and ambiguity. There are no black or white answers. And those who can do it as best, there will be criticism by someone or the other, but you've got to do what is fair to the employer, fair to the employee. And that's the way it should. But Claudia, on the coaching part.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that it'll be just the coaching part, but I think that as human beings today, we're in a very, let me say this, quote unquote, comfortable position of looking at other people's decision and be critical about them. We can take a look at what a government is doing, how the leader is dealing with that. We cannot equate country and company, but there are signs there. And there are signs also in the organizational history of development, you know, which have told us that the world is going to change much faster. Many years ago, and some of you who are here, I'm sure, have experienced that strategic planning was meant to be for 5 years, then for 3 years, then for 1 year. Now it's for every day. So it's like your strategic planning is about your present planning with exactly taking your words, maximum impact, minimum pain. But as we go through this, I think that companies, and I know there's a leader here of a company, and your position in life is get a team together to think about what the new way of coming out of it is going to be. Not how we're going to go through it, but which is the scenario that we would like to exemplify, you know, and be part of, you know. In other words, as a coach, as a consultant, I think that the best service we can provide our clients is to accompany them in thinking about ethical decisions, about minimizing impact, but being honest and telling the truth, and reinvigorating some of the qualities people will come up with through this hardship that we've never saw before in place. So we have to be very attentive, because we don't see them every day, but we can connect with them and see what their ideas come. So open up an idea box. I mean, let's what is going on. And I will share one example of what happens in Chile, which is like pay forward also. One of a bakery, you know, a bakery in the south of Chile decided not to raise their prices on bread. Bread is a staple here in Chile. It's a staple. I mean, when you don't eat bread, it's like not eating a chapati in India. So, and it's true, it's true. Yeah. And when, and they announced that the prices will increase by 30% on such a vital thing. It's huge. You know, people buy 2, 3, 4, 5 kilos of bread a day. So he decided to lower the price. So if today he decided to lower it 200 pesos, or let's say 10%, a little bit more than 10%. He sold everything. And on top of that, he decided to give away bread for free for people who could not afford it. It was such a huge impact in his community that the company that sold him the wheat and the flour decided to give it for free to him. Okay, for free. So he got, I don't know how many kilos of flour to keep on doing what he was doing. To me, that's a spirit. I mean, to me, that's what we should do, because obviously a huge company you cannot think in terms of bonuses. You cannot think in terms of 10% raise, or what you do deserves a reflection on your salary. Right now, we are happy we have a salary. Right now, we're happy that we're providing jobs for people. And I think, yes, we have to put light into that and to take very good examples like that, you know? Yeah.
True. Thank you.
No, you're
I think
welcome.
that was great.
No, you're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Praveen.
No, thank you,
Deepan, for
Deepan.
being here.
Yeah. So we'll be closing. Final remarks or comments that you would like to make very briefly, and maybe a takeaway, and we will close because we're really running over the time limit that we set, and we don't want to abuse your schedule. So please, final thoughts or comments that you would like to share, and we will be closing. I don't know, Carolina, if you have something, or Deepan or Sunita, who are still there.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And if you can, let's continue talking, because this is not going to end right now. I think we have a long way. I don't know how much, as you were mentioned, Claudia, but maybe we can talk about more about. Thank you very much, Pravir. Nice to know you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice to connect.
Sometime, yeah.
And we are very close here.
We are very, very close. It's true. We brought all the Indian community to Chile, so that's very nice.
Yes.
Lina, yes. Somebody else, Sunita or Deepan? Or?
Yeah. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Prabir. Very interesting conversation. It's great to know that all of us are actually in the same situation, same thoughts, and it's a great community to express it and know that this event is a great equalizer. It suddenly has brought all of us so close. Without our, the way we have always spoken and done, I would love to have much more dialogue around leadership, especially the last part, Claudia. That was very interesting and great. And thank you, Prabir, for this effort you have taken, and wanting to listen more and more to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
So thank you both, Prabir and Claudia. Prabir, I know you speak and write so much. I try to keep pace, but you're always ahead. So, and so, yeah, sorry, you're saying something, Claudia?
No, he is. He's very productive. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, he just has too many things to share, and I try to keep pace, but so when I try and be there, even if I'm silent, I try to listen to what you're saying. And today was another such occasion where you had a lot of value. Thank you so much, Prabir, and thank you, Claudia, for this opportunity, for this effort, and happy to listen to some of your views, and I feel enriched too for that too. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Pravir, final words and we leave. Okay, we're closing.
No, thank you. I think this has been wonderful. It just shows that India and Chile might be, continentally apart, but the agenda is very shared. The challenges are shared. We are all struggling for possible solutions and ideas, and let's continue this dialogue, and hopefully we make this a better, safer place and a more well-knit, emotionally connected world that we are in. So thank you very much, Claudia, for your initiative.
Thank you, Pravir. We will share this video, and there's a person here, Walter is right there. So we will be sharing this video. Thank you for coming, Walter, from Argentina.
Sorry, guys, I'm really late. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You're just on
Yeah,
time.
I can watch the video later.
Absolutely. We're going to post the video on YouTube channel and on Facebook, so you can keep it and go back to some of these concepts that I think is always relevant to keep in mind and do and develop a little bit further. Okay. So we'll be seeing you in some very future occasion, I'm sure. Okay. Thank you, Prabir.
Right,
Have a good evening.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yes, you take
Bye.
care.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
You too.